Alright, we're going to be talking about Articles 4 through 7 today. Just a quick review. Article 1 was about the legislative branch, 2 was about the executive branch, and the third was the judicial branch. And the help wanted, the 3 branches, the 4 advertisements that you did, went over all the basics that were outlined in the Constitution there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Article 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's start with Article 4. There's basically 4 parts to it. The first part is the full faith and credit clause. So that all that really says is whatever happens in one state, a law, a court ruling, certifications, other things, is if you go to a new state, it should translate to you. Now the laws in the state don't translate. So if it's legal in Colorado to smoke pot, it doesn't mean that it's legal in Michigan. But the laws that when you go in there, we will respect those laws. So Michigan can't overrule or do something on top of Colorado's laws. So that's kind of what it means by respecting the laws. The second one is you are protected from invasion. When I mean that, it's not like invasion of your personal privacy. We're talking about invasion from another country, or if there's a conflict between the states, that there's a way to negotiate and solve that issue. The next one is the extradition clause, that if you can't escape into another county or another state and be free, if you are caught and you did commit a crime in another state, you will be sent back. During the early days of the Civil War, or just before, slaves on the Underground Railroad were leaving up to Canada, but if they were caught in the northern states, they must be returned because they were escaped property. So that's the third piece. And then the fourth piece is the fact that each state must have a republican form of government. It does not necessarily have to have a democracy, but it must have some type of thing where the people have the voice. The next piece is the relations between the states. The last piece of Article 4 is that there cannot be any new states created from current states. Only brand new states can be approved. So in other words, I can't take 2 states, combine them together. I can't take a North and a South Dakota, North and a South Carolina, put them into one, or separate one, like turning Michigan into 2 states. Call it Superior State or Upper Peninsula Michigan, something along that lines. The only way that would ever happen is if that personal or that individual state does it. Congress cannot do that. Article 5. This basically is the amendment article, and it says that there's 2 ways to change the Constitution. The first is Congress in Washington, D.C. Both houses have to have 2/3 to say, yes, we want this amendment. Or if the states get together, and if those states get together and those legislators get together and they hold a convention and 2/3 of the states approve it, then it can become an amendment. One of those things that might be that is, say, the legalization of marijuana. If the state legislators get together and hold a convention, that could be that way. The approval of that goes back to that same convention, which is the lower number then, a number of 3/4 of the ratification of the conventions held in each state. So if that same convention 2/3 approve it or propose it, at 75% or 3/4 of those states would have to approve it, or it would go back to the state legislatures and they must do it. So notice that there is, for approval or ratification, there is absolutely nothing to do with Congress in here. Only the states can pass the amendments. So here's a little graphic that shows a little bit more of it. Upper left-hand side, notice here's Congress. Down here in the lower left-hand side is a national convention where they all get together in one place. Approval is by 3/4 of the states. It goes to the individual legislature at the states. They say yes or no, or it actually goes back to the same convention, and where those delegates and those convention heads get together and they approve 3/4 of it. There are 27 total amendments right now. 11 of them are in the Bill of Rights. And some of you are going, wait a minute, I thought there were 10 in the Bill of Rights. But there was 10 in the original Bill of Rights. There was actually 12 that were proposed. The 11th one, or the first one that was cut, had to deal with how many people would be in Congress, and they felt that wasn't necessary as it was already written into the Constitution, so they scrapped it. The third one was pay raises. They didn't want to deal with it because they didn't know how money would be dealt with in this new system, so they got rid of that one. Ironically enough, back in the 27th Amendment, the last amendment we had, is Congress could make their own pay raises. So the one that got struck out at the very beginning of the original 12 is now actually back in. So that's why we say 11 of the original Bill of Rights are in there. That we've had a couple other very close amendments more recently. When they write an amendment, it stays on the books until Congress says we're not going to vote on it anymore, or they can set a time limit. We're going to look at Equal Rights Amendment, and we've got 5 months to approve it. If it's not approved, it dies. So, and then some of them have taken a little bit longer, some shorter, some Congress hasn't even put a time on them at all. The 6th is the Supremacy Clause. It's pretty much a one statement. It just basically says no law should be written above the Constitution. It says that when you make a treaty, it is made with the nation, not individual states. And there is no religious test for a federal office. Any religion is removing that piece of separation of church and state is in there. So if there is a conflict with the Supremacy Clause, the federal always wins. Article 7 is irrelevant nowadays, but it really said that if we're going to approve this Constitution, we have to have 9 of the 13 states to pass it. This was a major bone of contention with that. Federalists and anti-federalists, is nobody wanted to approve it without those individual rights. So there was a lot of, we'll talk a little bit more about the Federalists and anti-federalists to get to those 9 states, and how they agreed to disagree to get to that point. But that's another point for another time. I'll leave you hanging with a little carrot to wonder how that all went down.